It's the hardcore legend Mick Foley, and you are listening to Bell to Bell with Bobby Blaze.
Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an update.
Karl Gotch was a king. Karl Gotch, he was a killer in the ring. He was a king out of the ring. He tell my coach, Mr. Vergania, don't fuck with me. I'm a killer in the ring, and I'm a king outside of the ring. Karl Gotch, I never die. You died. You break my heart, but I love you.
If you're not familiar with Karl Gotch, the thing is, he was legit. Karl wrestled in the 48 Olympics. Karl went to the snake pit over in England, where he became a really tough, legitimate shooter, and he had an amateur background.
But the jiu-jitsu idiots that say, oh, because a guy called Kimura beat the Gracies with a double wrist lock, the Gracies named it a Kimura.
And Kimura
learned it from Karl Gotch from my gym.
He was also a street fighter. He would fuck you up. He was I met him when I was in Tampa, and I've told the story before. And he didn't like people. He learned English from the military, from the U.S. military during World War II when he was younger, and he just grabbed my hand, and he hated guys with long hair because he always kept his hair short and his nails clipped, and just a gentleman's gentleman.
Well, the change that they're going to bring in wrestling is going to put more life in it again, stay away from gimmicks, and go back to the sport of wrestling. And I think with the new strong and young wrestlers that we have now, like I just said, the new generation, they call themselves the Gotch family because they practice more wrestling than gimmicks, and they want to stay away from it and bring the people to sport where the wrestling actually is. To me, wrestling is just like playing a game of chess. Only this, the reflex got to be a lot faster. You don't have that much time to figure out your moves. You got to pick up your moves, and as soon as it is there in the split second, you have to have your reaction. And that's what those boys are all able to do. So I think they will bring back the life and the life-living to wrestling.
But a legitimate tough guy, and he just, I met him at Professor Malenko's house. We went all watch the pay-per-view, and Karl was there, and he reached over and goes, Gotch. He just grabbed my hand and went, Gotch. When I said, Bobby Blaze, Gotch. And it's like, oh shit, he crushed my hand like I was talking about earlier. But he was known for his conditioning. He did like 9,001 Hindu squats one time because he heard some Indian fucking wrestler done like 9,000. But he just fucking turned his TV on. It took him like 8 hours or something. And he just fucking started doing Hindu squats until he did 9,001. He used to do, he was trainer. When he first went to Japan, I think in the early 60s, I know 63, I think might have been his first tour. I could be wrong on that date, but he instantly got over because they liked that style. I've heard it said, and I've seen a couple since then. At the time, I hadn't seen any, they said, well, watch one. I've heard it said, and I won't mention the person who told me, said, oh, his matches are boring or whatever. It was a style. It was a different style back in the day that they did. So you might not find it as highly as entertaining as you would today's product. You would see some legitimate good wrestling. I've heard stories I can sit here and tell you that I've heard in Tampa. I do know that I guess in Inoki's fight with Muhammad Ali, Karl Gotch was one of his corner men. So that's one of those things where, like, if something goes wrong, Karl Gotch was ready to step in against Muhammad Ali. I guess when they got up there to get the instructions, Gotch had his like New Japan sweatpants and his shirt on and this and that, and again, Karl was known for ungodly strength. Even though he didn't lift weights, he done push-ups and neck bridges, and he lifted weights for about a year, he said. But he was a big old strong guy, man. Apparently he pulled his tights out and he had on his trunks underneath, and he said, just so you know, if there's any monkey business tonight, I'll be handling that. And I guess Ali and whoever else was standing there, like Inoki knew, like, whatever happens, happens, but there'll be no funny business. I think he used the word monkey business. But again, you hear these things and like, maybe he said it, maybe he didn't. I know he's a legitimate tough guy though, and I know you didn't want to fuck with him. When I first met him, again, that was the story I told there where he said, Gotch, and shook my hand. He come into the training facility one day, and Larry looked over, and they had this relationship, Malenko, and I said they on and off again, business partners, respect for each other, and this and that, and sometimes they spoke, and sometimes they would, be like, best just to keep our distance, business only, kind of thing, and Karl comes walking in, and he's looking for Jody, actually, and Joe Malenko, and so was supposed to be there. And Karl just walks straight into the facility, but he's focused. He knows what he's there for. He's going to do his business and leave. And I don't know what's going on. I just heard his name, whatever. And I was sitting there, and that's after he got past us, Malenko looked over and he goes, Bobby, that man right there, one tough son of a bitch. And he said, yeah, he said, he's the man. And he went over, he spoke to Joe, and he walked out the back door and kept going. And it was several, it might have been a few months later before I actually met him. When I said, he's reached over to Gotch, because I told him I was one of Malenko's students, and that's why I was at his house where. But yeah, he was a man. He was a very serious person. But yeah. So first time I saw him, he was very impressive. He was like 60. Probably 65 years old, and he had this fucking killer physique on him, hard as a rock body even then. But I guess him and Larry weren't talking at that time, but there was a mutual respect to not interfere with each other's business. And of course, Joe thinks the world of him. That was his basically a second father, and that's who trained Jody. And apparently they had something to speak about, and that was business only, and it was their business. And they're grown men when I saw them, and I was like, oh, man. And, of course, the German suplex is named after him, and I do think you can get that on someone out in a street fight if you get behind them and you got the fucking hip thrust and the strength. But there used to be at the training facility in Tampa, they had all these Japan posters and pictures and things, but there was a beautiful black and white picture, man, of Karl Gotch delivering a picture perfect and pun intended of a German suplex with a huge crowd behind him, and with him doing a beautiful bridge up on his toes, and it's got the guy's shoulders pinned and his head's on him. I could go on about Karl, but a lot of people didn't like him. They thought he was an old crusty bastard, and the fact was he was an old crusty bastard, and that's why he was a legitimate tough guy. No one wanted to fuck with him, and a lot of people didn't like the way they trained, his training style. He trained a lot of guys back in the day that went on to become big superstars in wrestling because he did train them. They might not have liked his techniques and stuff, but they sure as hell, learned a lot from him. And like you said, in Japan, he's known as a god of wrestling. So number 2 is Karl Gotch.
Karl Gotch's training method was primarily based on Indian wrestlers, lots of body weight training.
Yes.
So push-ups, press-ups, Hindu squats, Hindu push-ups. Also, he was Antonio Inoki's biggest inspiration in Inoki's wrestling style. So a lot of Gotch's trainees were the guys that went on to found the original Japanese UWF back in the early 1980s. So you could make the argument that Karl Gotch's wrestling style is the foundation of Japanese pro wrestling to this day.
You know how they got the name that you use all the time, the Kimura?
Yeah, from the guy who fought Helio Gracie.
Yes, but he was a judo champion, and in judo, they kicked him out of Japan because he wanted to go pro as a wrestler, which he did. So he'd go down and he'd beat everybody with a double wrist lock, a downward arm crank, and so they couldn't pronounce double wrist lock or downward arm crank, so they said the Kimura, and...
So it's just based on the move that beat Helio.
Yeah, but he beat a lot of guys, and the pro wrestlers... Karl Gotch, he beat everybody with that hold, but he did it a little bit different. He'd break the wrist, the elbow, and the shoulder.
Order Pin Me, Pay Me, Have Boots Will Travel by professional wrestler Bobby Blaze Smedley. Go to Amazon.com and get your copy now. It's a powerful and insightful 5-star memoir available to download or in paperback print edition.